Hello, everyone, and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, Dealing with Challenging Patrons, Safety and Security at Our Library, with Dr. Steve Albrecht. Steve is a trainer, speaker, author, and consultant, internationally known for his expertise in high-risk HR and security issues. He is well known in libraries around the U.S. for his Challenging Patrons workshop, based on his 2015 ALA book, Library Security. He also specializes in workplace and school violence awareness and crisis response programs for private sector firms, municipal and state government, K-12 schools, and colleges and universities. Steve is retired from the San Diego Police Department, where he had been working since 1984, both as a full-time officer and later as a reserve sergeant, reserve training officer, and domestic violence investigator. Coming to you now, it's Dr. Steve Albrecht.
Thanks a lot, and good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate your time and attention today. I know your time is valuable, and my function is to give you as much information as we can in the hour that we're together. I'm told that it's National Library Week, so congratulations for that. I also am told that you have a new ALA president, so that's exciting news. I've got a great relationship with ALA. Those of you that follow what's going on over there, they published my book in 2015, and I was happy to be a partner with them for that. And I do a lot of webinars for them, including yesterday I did a webinar for ALA, and it was a great program. So I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. If I don't get to your specific issue, please feel free to email me. Feel free to come to me on Twitter as well. I'm at Dr. Steve Albrecht on Twitter. That's at Dr. and then Steve and then my last name, Albrecht, on Twitter. So send me an email and I'm happy to give you what I can as an email response, or if I don't get to your chat question today. So my response to library security came about 17, 18 years ago when I was working in my office and someone called me from an organization called Info People in California at the time that I was in California. I'm in Colorado now. Wanted me to do a program on library security. And about 18 years ago, I said, libraries? What goes on? What could possibly go wrong at the library in terms of security? And of course, I was quickly brought up to speed about all the issues that you face as a library professional. And so about 18, 19 years ago, I started working in San Francisco Public Library, San Jose, Oakland, Los Angeles, and then I went around the country. Chicago, DC, Baltimore, Washington, New York, Florida, Atlanta. Been all around the country talking about library security in my half-day workshop. So a lot of what I've got from my work in this area has come from you, and I appreciate your feedback and your concerns. And I'm always trying to address what really goes on in the library. So I have an article coming out in the ALA magazine. It's in June. It'll be in the June issue, ALA Libraries magazine. It's on security. And here's some of the things I'm going to touch on in the library security article that's coming out pretty soon. One is, and this is my list of top 10 things that I'm seeing library people face as security issues. One is heroin use in the library, opiate addicts passing out and dying, as we saw happen in San Francisco Public back in February. Now we're seeing library professionals being asked if they want to go to Narcan training, and Narcan is the antidote to opiate overdose. It brings people back to life. You put a squirt in one of their nostrils or in both nostrils, or you give an injection with a little small injectable needle into the leg, and they pop back to life. And they're wicked angry, and they throw up oftentimes. So that's an exciting feature that you have for opiate addicts. We'll talk about their behavior in the library. We'll talk also about ransomware, which is now people are getting their library systems are being attacked by these hackers from inside or outside the United States. They want some kind of payment before they unlock the system. We'll talk about those guys. I'm interested in the tax seeking person that comes into the library, tax information, and also for those of you that work in law libraries, the people that come in for free legal advice, which you know legally you can't give to them, and they're furious when you hear that. I'm also interested in the eccentric patron who has some kind of relationship with somebody, an elected official or a mayor, or they know someone in the library board, and they're very emphatic about how they pay your salary and how that you need to do whatever they say. And sometimes they're quite eccentric. They could be even mentally ill. They have money, they have a house, they have people that watch out for them, but they come into the library to want to fight or argue or engage or challenge you in certain things. And I'm interested in those patrons as well. I'm also looking at concealed weapons that are coming into the library. We have a big shift in this country towards concealed weapon reciprocity, which is that a lot of people in the NRA are trying to get concealed weapons reciprocity for people that have CCW permits. So we may see issues where people have exposed or covered firearms in the library and what we do about that. I'm interested in the vape issue. People are vaping marijuana now. And again, as we look at the evolution of marijuana laws in this country, we see more opportunities to use marijuana publicly. Vaping is usually illegal anywhere that, like the airplane and the library, but we still see people using marijuana for vaping. I'm also interested in the ongoing saga of the service dog versus the emotional comfort animal. And so I've seen weasels and rats and snakes and ferrets and scorpions and tarantulas being brought into the library as opposed to a true service dog with a little vest who's actually trained to be a service dog. We'll talk about that issue as well. I'm interested in religious confrontations that sometimes happen in the library. I had a woman call me from upstate New York that said one of her children's librarians called her and said that some woman had come in and unrolled her prayer rug and blocked the entrance to the children's library, and they asked me what I thought they should do, and I said politely tell her to move. Just because she wants to pray in the building is fine, but you can't block the aisle and block the entrance or block any of the exits. And so I'm interested in people who are trying to create some type of international incident or confrontation based on their religious beliefs at your facility. And then the last one, second to the last one for my article coming up here in June, is religiously oriented panhandlers, people that stand in front of your building or inside your building. They're wearing pseudo-religious garb. It could be sort of nun's outfit or a priest's outfit. They're not really a priest or a nun. There's a sense that people give money to them, and we don't know whether it's actual, a viable, realistic, actual valid religious organization or charity. And then the last one is outdated codes of conduct. And I see this a lot in my work, which is the code of conduct for your facility doesn't match what is going on for you at your facility. And when we look at codes of conduct, I'll talk about this as we go forward. The idea is we want it to be a living, breathing document that's updated on a regular basis. So people ask me all the time in my work, when do we get involved in situations that involve safety or security at the library? And the simple answer I always give is when it impacts the business in a negative way. If you have somebody sleeping in the library and you're not allowed to sleep in the library, I'm okay with that as long as they're not disruptive when they're doing it on top of the table or laying on a counter or something like that. So I think we know the difference between disruptive behavior versus eccentric behavior. We can't always pick our customers. We don't always know who comes in the door. But I'm always looking at what impacts the staff in terms of safety and security and what impacts the patrons in terms of safety and security. And is it a business impact? Then you have to address it. And in addressing it, I want everybody to have the same message. I talk about this in my training programs and in the book all the time. Firm, fair, consistent, and assertive in your response to these issues. What we want to create is an environment where people believe that the rules are enforced, the code of conduct and the patron behavior rules are enforced Monday through Sunday the same way. What I sometimes see is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're vigilant. We take care of our business, but on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there's a different staff in there, and they're not very assertive, and they're a little fearful, and they're anxious about fulfilling the code of conduct, and so then people get away with stuff. And you know as well as me that people talk on the street, especially street people, homeless, mentally ill, people like that, about what they can or cannot get away with in the library. If we're firm, fair, and consistent all the way through, it tends to be much better in terms of the environment we're creating. So I'm always interested in what the library workplace is perceiving and how it's changing over time. We see an emphasis now on electronics. We see so many more opportunities for people to log on and become connected to you through their tablets and their phones. But then there are people that miss the old library. And maybe you as a staff member, you miss the old library as well. The old library was quiet. The old library had respect for the employees, like teachers were respected in the old days in schools. The old library was a place where you could study and work and research. And nowadays, people who miss the old library really miss the card catalog. They don't like the internet. They don't feel comfortable with doing things electronically. They want to talk to a person and not a machine. And I think there are frustrated patrons who don't know about or care about our policies and procedures. They believe they can come in and do whatever they want, or their kids can, or their teenagers. There's a sense of stress for people in the library environment. I see this because I work a lot in government. The first thing for government officials to cut is the swimming pools, the parks, the maintenance, and the libraries. And so if you're blessed to have full staffing If you're blessed to have a security function or a security officer in your library, you're different than many other libraries that I go to. Many librarians I talk to are way short-staffed. We have folks doing a lot of work, more than ever before, and it creates stress for them. And it also creates stress for the patrons. That last line in the slide, the 72/7 world mirrors our world and the patrons' world, comes back to some conversations I've had with my psychologist colleagues who say that we are no longer living in a 24/7 world. The world's actually a lot faster. 72/7 seems sort of the norm now, and people are just going 1,000 miles an hour. Everybody has a phone. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody is communicating faster than ever before, and we're talking less and less to each other face to face. So there's a stress that creates that comes from that kind of cultural shift that we've had towards the technology. A little patience, I think, with our patrons would help, a little patience with each other, and recognizing that sometimes the stress that you feel is the stress that they feel as well. So here's my keys to our discussion today. I guess the first thing I would say to you is the biggest safety and security tip I would give to you and to your staff if you're a supervisor is stop telling patrons who are angry to calm down. That's never worked in the history of mankind. I have scars all over my body from telling people to calm down. It's never worked. When you think about calm down as a response, all it does is make the person angry. We'll talk about venting and validation, how important that is, but calm down never works. So for us, keys to library security, safety, vigilance on the part of supervisors, the leadership team, vigilance on the part of the employees, and listening to patrons who point out safety and security concerns to us. Doing an assessment of your facility. I put a checklist in the appendix of the book. There's a checklist on how to do your own security assessment without being a security consultant. Doing this maybe once a year or every couple of years, and then talking about the results, the things that you need, new door locks, new access control, new key cards, new lighting, additional lighting in the parking lot, exterior lighting, fixing things that are broken inside the facility is a conversation you need to have on a regular basis with your facilities people for your city or your county. Updated, living, breathing codes of conduct, which you can see from posted locations in the library. I'm a big fan of keeping poster-size copies of the code of conduct posted on walls all around the library so people can't say they don't know what they're responsible for. And updating those codes of conduct to use real language, not the language attorneys use, but real language. And sometimes those suggestions and ideas and new changes come from staff meetings that you have with each other, or that feedback that you get from surveys that you do with your patrons or individual discussions with patrons. Coming up to the bottom of the list there, the security incident reports is critical to me. I look at whether or not we should get a restraining order against a certain patron, and the first thing I'm going to ask for is the paperwork. Let me see the file on this guy. So I come into the library and they tell me this guy's been a mess for 2 years, and I say, where's the file? Let me see the security incident reports, and there aren't any. So we have this Navajo Hopi tradition of passing things down orally from generation to generation, and sometimes that's not useful if we have to go to a judge or a city attorney or county council to get a restraining order against somebody who's threatened our folks or threatened another patron or is trespassing. It's tough to do. So you don't have to document everything, but I would like to see more security incident reports that are filled out for things that happen involving some of our more problematic or difficult or challenging or even eccentric patrons, and we'll talk about who they are. And lastly, a liaison relationship with law enforcement. The city police or the county sheriff's deputies can come into your facility in my perfect world on a regular basis, interact with you, take a look at the bathrooms, walk around the stacks, go up and down the floors if there are some, check everybody out, and then leave. Come back 2 days later, come back twice in one day, come back 3 times in one day, and then not again for a week. What we want the cops to do is send a message that they are vigilant, they are in partnership with you, and the bad guys that are coming into the library have to guess when they're going to be there. So this is important, I believe. People sometimes say that, well, I can't fix everything, Steve. I can't get involved in every situation. I agree. I'm not expecting you to break up fights. I'm not expecting you to hold people or detain them until the cops get there. I just want you to be a professional witness. I want you to provide good information to the sheriff or the PD when they respond. I want everybody to believe as an employee of the library that they are in charge of safety and security. We don't have to get in confrontations, but we want to be able to witness things and see things and tell the cops and the sheriffs what's going on when they get there. So 3 key themes to our discussion about being safe at the library. One is we want people to be able to protect themselves. You as a staff member have a right to physically protect yourself if you need to, but my preference would be that you disengage. And so watch from a safe distance. And I think sometimes employees, and I hear this in my workshops, they feel like they can't leave the circulation desk. They can't leave the piece of carpet they're standing on. They're not allowed to leave this position or where they're standing. And I say, if your intuition tells you go someplace safe and call the police, then do that. If your intuition tells you maybe I need to get a supervisor to come over and to speak to this person because I'm not getting through to them, then do that. Maybe I need to change the ratios of confrontation and bring over somebody else who has better alignment, better connection, better rapport with this patron, then do that. Maybe I need to get some space and distance, arm's length plus a little bit more in front of this person, or maybe I need to use a proxemic barrier like a desk or a counter or a rolling cart or a half shelf, something like that I put between myself and somebody who's furiously angry. Working smart means knowing when to hear your intuition, doing the right thing, disengage if you need to, get help if you need to. We're going to talk about code words and the value of code words here. I use code words based on what color the cops or the sheriff's uniform is in your town. Mr. Blue, Dr. Brown, Mr. Black, Mr. Green, whatever color uniform they wear, use that as a code word. When I was living in California, we used Arnold, as in Arnold Schwarzenegger. Call Arnold meant go to a safe place and call the PD or the sheriff. And the middle one is critical as well. We want staff to keep themselves safe by also not making situations worse. Condescension or talking down to patrons or cutting them off just leads to more of these types of confrontations we want to avoid. The idea is that we want people to manage their stress, staff members, by controlling their breathing, by slowing down their responses, by slowing down the situation, by getting help, taking care of themselves so that they don't contribute to the person's anger. What we want these folks to do who are problematic or difficult or dangerous or threatening or just eccentric is to go away. And sometimes we want people to go away relatively satisfied that we did the best we could for them. We're not going to solve everybody's problem, but we do want some sense of closure that we're doing the right thing on the patron's behalf. And we'll talk about what some of those steps are as we go forward. So are we into profiles or behaviors when it comes to library security? And the answer is behaviors. I don't care what people look like, I care what they do. And so I'm always asking people to define or describe what this patron does in terms of their behavior. I don't care about their demographics, I care about their behavior. What's our goal in the library? Is it peace or justice? And it's obviously peace. Peace is we want a safe, comfortable environment that people can use of all ages and people feel safe there. And when they talk about the library, they do it in positive ways. What should asking for help as an employee mean? It simply means you need help, not that you can't do your job, not that you're not skilled. Sometimes I see this in the library environment where people are afraid to ask for help because they feel like they will be looked down upon or their supervisor or coworker will believe they're not very skilled. It should simply mean, hey, this guy's difficult, this guy's problematic, this person is confrontive, this woman is arguing, I need some help, could you help me with this? That should be fine. Related to that, do we need to use the chain of command to call the PD or the sheriff or the fire department or the paramedics? The answer is no. If your boss is out of town and you think intuitively, I wonder if I should call the cops, call the cops. You don't need permission. You're an intuitive professional adult, and I think we have to train people, remind them to do that. Under stress, we go back to how we have been trained. Sometimes we see situations where people dial 911 and they forget to dial the first 9. So I'm a big fan of training for high-risk situations like that so they know how to get a hold of the first responders carefully and effectively. This concept of alignment is a big one with me, with patrons. How do we align with patrons based on age or race or gender or previous contact? Or sometimes a supervisor has better alignment with this person because they want to talk to somebody in charge or not. And so the idea of alignment for me is, can we connect the best employee in the room for the person that's having the issues? And sometimes you have good alignment and the person that your coworker does not with this person, then you handle it. If not, then trade off. If everybody hates you, then the problem is you, by the way. If there are no consequences to the patron's behavior, it's going to continue. If we don't call the police when there is theft, if we don't call the cops if there is drunken guys fighting in the library, if we don't enforce our codes of conduct, there's no consequences for the behavior, then their behaviors are going to continue. I don't mean we have to run a prison camp, but I like a lot of structure. I got 5 dogs. I'm into consequences. No treats until you go potty. Consequences are important. Also, acting skills. I happen to stand in front of total strangers and talk all week long. I am an introvert trapped in an extrovert's job. Many people that I have met in the library world are also introverts as well, but they have to be situational extroverts when they're dealing with people. And sometimes that means you need to act. You have to act enthusiastic or excited or happy to talk to people, even though your internal desire may be to go in the back and shut the door. So acting skills are important, especially when dealing with problematic, eccentric people. And then doing your job versus doing your job safely, this is another thing which is connected to asking for help, which is, should I do my job or do my job safely? The answer is, of course, do your job safely. Steve, I have two 17-year-old linebackers from the high school fighting in the library. Should I go over and break up the fight? The answer is no. Do I have two 5-year-olds pulling hair? Should I go over and separate them? The answer is sure. So I want people to do their job safely, and that means maybe disengage or go to a safe place or use a proxemic barrier or get some help and not just put yourself in a position of risk, but be a professional witness. And the last one we talked about before, which is the idea of the security incident report. If we can measure situations that involve safety and security, then we can manage them. And if we don't capture and copy what went on, it's hard to know what to fix. And so when people tell me it's not very safe here, or I don't like these certain patrons for what they do, I'm always going to say, well, give me the reports. Let me see what I've seen over a span of time that gives me a sense of whether this person's behavior is escalating or getting better or worse, or are they depressed or dangerous or threatening, or what's their behavior like. If we document these things, we have a better response to what we're going to do. I hope that makes sense. So look at this collection of things that you deal with on a regular basis in your facility. You could be in an urban library, you could be in a rural library, you could be in a university library, you could be in a law library. I've seen all of these things in each one of these places. The angry or entitled or eccentric patrons, we talked about sometimes they like to say that they pay your salary. The issue there is letting them vent. I'm a big fan of venting and validation, letting people vent. The more they talk, the longer you can wait to respond and give them empathetic, patient responses, the better the situation tends to be. I'm going to talk about a book which I like a lot called Verbal Judo, which was written by a guy named George Thompson. Thompson passed away a couple years ago. He's from Tampa, Florida. I highly recommend that book, especially as a staff book report project. Everybody needs to read it and think about some of these issues he's talking about. Angry people like to vent. We can validate their concerns. I see, I understand, you could be right. Tell me more. I'm sorry that happened to you, sir. It really does a lot to lower the emotional temperature. Unruly kids and teenagers, my most problematic groups that I tend to deal with is junior high school level. You have a careful mixture there of puberty and hormones and peer pressure and being hypersensitive to being slighted. I like to separate kids when I talk to them in groups, not talk to the whole group, but talk to one. Those of you that work with this population probably have good success with that technique as well. I do the same thing with parents, separate them, talk to one parent, not both of them. They tend to gang up on you sometimes. There's a phrase I use for a lot of people on this list, two phrases actually. One phrase is, you can't do that if you want to stay here. And the other phrase is, our insurance won't let you do that. Some kid's trying to ride a skateboard inside the library. You can't do that if you want to stay here, or our insurance won't let you do that. Both of those phrases work, especially when people, as adults, hate being told what to do. Sometimes when you say, you can't do that if you want to stay here, people will comply because we give them a choice. Fine, I'll just leave then or whatever. But sometimes they hate being told what to do, especially by people younger than them. So I love using, you can't do that if you want to stay here, or our insurance won't let you do that. And parenthetically, I work for a lot of insurance companies, and they probably won't let you do that, because let these people do this because it's dangerous and it puts us at risk of somebody being injured or us getting sued. So I like both of those phrases, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. I've seen stalking behaviors by patrons that come in and look at your name tag and go to your Google and your computer and your library and find out information about you. I find that ironic. That's what they do. I like a little privacy where we just use ID names that are just your first name and your job title. Sometimes I see domestic violence crossover from home to work involving employees. Sometimes I see it involving patrons come in, the victim and the perpetrator come into the facility. We're going to talk about what to do about that issue as a partnership with some of our social service providers, domestic violence advocacy groups, or law enforcement. And speaking of law enforcement, if you're lucky, they come by. If you're not, they don't. If you're lucky, you have some sense of a security guard in your facility. Most libraries I go to do not. Sometimes they have a part-time page, or some retired Marine, or somebody that's an older gentleman that has that kind of function. Sometimes they can be very effective, sometimes not. In my perfect world, you'd have a security function, security officer that is well-trained and professional and polite, but also assertive and make sure that things stay safe in your facility and not let stuff get out of hand in the library, in the bathrooms, in the stacks, in some of the other areas where people, get up to no good. Thievery in the library is an issue for me where I go to a lot of libraries and people say, well, we disconnected the book alarms because it's a hassle, and then as a result, people steal everything that's not nailed down. Use a parallel here. If you see this convenience store in your neighborhood, whether it's a 7-Eleven or a Circle K or a Come and Go or whatever it is, the idea that if somebody comes in and steals beer, steals cigarettes, steals liquor from the place, the party line from the corporate headquarters is to call the police, and the cops have to come out and take a petty theft report. And maybe the cops don't like to do that, and maybe the cops think they have better things to do, but too bad. That's their job. What we want to send is a message to people that if you steal from the library, we make a report. If you steal from the library, we're going to ask you to give the material back before you leave. Hey, sir, I noticed you put that collection of DVDs in your backpack. Do you want me to put these up front at the circulation desk until you're ready to check them out? I'm not talking about chasing people up the street or tackling folks or confronting them physically, but seeing if you can use your words and use your assertiveness to get them to return the material. And if they steal from you, we call the cops. The homeless and the mentally ill and substance abusers, if we're lucky, we have all three rolled into one person. That is probably the most difficult thing that I deal with in libraries around the country. The homeless issue is they come in, they set up camp, they make things difficult for other people, they intimidate staff, they intimidate patrons. We'll talk about what to do about them. Substance abusers, it's illegal to be high on drugs and alcohol in public. We call the cops for people that can't control their goodies. Gang members, they come into the library to steal or to sell drugs or intimidate people or to just simply tag or mark up your materials or the walls or the restrooms. Pull that stuff off the shelves, paint over, have facilities fix that stuff so we don't allow that to continue. It creates responses by other gangs, and we have a lot of problems with that, using your facility as sort of a territory to engage with each other. Internet hogs and creeps. I define hogs as people that don't respect the time limits and the boundaries, and they stay on the machine forever. They do the 50-yard dash at 10 o'clock in the morning when you open the library, and they don't come off the machine until 4 in the afternoon. I'm a big fan of filtering. I'm a big fan of time limits. I'm a big fan of internet policies. I'm a big fan of internet vigilance. Internet creeps tends to be about pornography, inappropriate content. That's why I like filtering. That's why I like privacy screens. That's why I like separating dividers between internet screens so we can limit the amount of content that people show to little kids or people walking by with the express intent of embarrassing or making them feel afraid. And then the last one, stinkers, talkers, smokers, bathers, eaters, and sleepers. Those are all the names of my daughter's favorite punk rock bands. I think there's a couple things in here. One is, what does your code of conduct say? And the other is maybe you have to have difficult conversations with people that have hygiene issues or people that are loud, just to say, I need to have a separate conversation with you. I know this is embarrassing, but I got to ask you to come back cleaner or not yell so much or do this or do that, because it just hurts the way we run our business, and we got to keep it safe for everybody. That's a hard conversation to have, but it is a necessary one. Maybe it's done by a supervisor. Maybe it's done by somebody that has good rapport, or at least better rapport with that patron. So I'm assuming, based on my work and what I've heard from you over the years, that these are many of the issues that you've dealt with, plus some of the things I talked about in my that's coming in the forthcoming library article. Vaping is a big issue for me. I see in libraries, electronic cigarettes for people using these things. I think we have to have a written policy about it, especially marijuana use, if that's a concern in your state or in your county. People soliciting for money, either panhandling or using their pseudo-religious uniforms and things like that. I think get some feedback from city attorney or county council about what your limitations are, whether you can ask these people to leave. I believe you can. Interfering with the safe use of the library. The most common thing that I see is typically transients coming in, homeless people coming in groups of 15 or 20 with all their bags and bags of goodies. They set up shop, they block the aisles, they sit in one location. People are afraid to go there. People don't typically talk about what they are afraid of. They'll just leave and not say anything, or they'll post on social media how the library is not a safe place. We'll talk about a response to those guys. And the biggest response I can see is two ways. One, that we have a group discussion with the stakeholders of homeless issues in your city or your county. That includes social services, homeless advocacy groups, the police, mental health professionals, substance abuse professionals. I'll talk about the best use of a committee response to task force response to homelessness in your library. And the second is that you, as a library supervisor, need to have a conversation with what seems like, or what looks like to you anyway, the smartest, most sober of the people there to say, look, you can't do this. You guys can't come in and block the way and leave trash and make a mess and sleep and lay around. You got to leave for the day. You can only come back on an occasional basis if you're not going to use the library in the usual, normal, reasonable way. If you're not willing to do that, then I'm going to talk to the cops about arresting you for warrants and drug use and being under the influence of alcohol. It's not what I want to do, but I got to keep this place safe for everybody. And you guys are messing up what we're trying to do in our plan. That's not an easy conversation to have, but it is a necessary one, and you may need to have it with the cop standing at your shoulder, or you may need to have it with some other social service professional standing by, social workers, mental health advocates, child protective services or adult protective services. All those people could be stakeholders in part of that conversation. We talked about the internet. We talked about bikes and skateboards as you can't do that if you want to stay here, or our insurance won't let you do that. We talked about the value of police reports for theft or vandalism. Restrooms, again, a big issue, especially with the homeless and the mentally ill. Do not send more than or less than 2 people into a restroom as staff members. 2 women to the women's side and 2 men to the men's side. Don't send them in by themselves. Don't have them go all the way inside the restroom. Have them stand in the open door. Ask the person to leave. If that doesn't work, then call the cops and have them issue a trespass warning. And shirts and shoes, that's up to you. Unattended kids is something I see a lot. I see library people staying an hour and a half, 2 hours after the library is closed with some kid. This is ridiculous. If you have an unattended child, call the police. Enforce your policy on this. I see parents, alleged parents, who have dropped off their kid at the library for 12 hours with a can of Coke and a ham sandwich and say, I'll see you later. That's child abuse from my perspective. Everybody on this call is a mandated reporter for child abuse or for elder abuse or for developmentally disabled adults who are being abused. So look at kids and say, is this behavior of this kid reasonable because he has a bus pass and a cell phone and a bicycle or a skateboard, or is this a kid that's been dropped off and the library is this kid's home for 12 hours a day? That should be child abuse from my perspective. Again, sleeping, eating and drinking, what's your policies on enforcement? Electronic devices, now people are coming in and playing their tablets and laptops and cell phone videos without headphones. How do you enforce that? What is your thumb drive policy? We talked about how difficult but necessary the hygiene conversation is to have. We also talked about how certain parts of the population will have, the homeless population will bring in all their stuff and block the aisles and the exits. Again, something we need to address. So I hope that is a good sort of laundry list of the people that you deal with in your work. Those are the ones that I see in my world. So I always talk about, I mentioned this in the book and things that I write, my perfect library world. My perfect library world, you'd have a little old lady librarian who could come over and talk to some 6'7", 300-pound mentally ill homeless guy and ask him to leave, and he would do it. Little old lady librarians are very valuable because they can enforce consequences, and they do it in a way that doesn't cause a fight because nobody wants to fight a little old lady librarian. But if I did it, it would cause a big fist fight for sure. So I like alignment, sometimes based on age or race or gender or previous contact, where someone just comes over and says, could you please do less of this or more of this? And the person complies because they see alignment with the person they're talking to. In my perfect library world, besides a good relationship with the police, we'd also see code of conduct, which is poster size, visible around the facility, not just on a clipboard, not just on the website, but written in positive language. Not no eating in the library, but please enjoy your food and beverage outside. The other one is, can it be written in such a way where a normal person, maybe not somebody who speaks English as their first language, could read and understand it? I love my attorney friends. They're the only folks that can write a 60,000-word document called a brief. But sometimes I want things written in plain English. And I think that you need to be the conduit of improved, updated, living, breathing code of conduct, having regular discussions with staff, regular discussions with patrons, regular discussions with your city attorneys and county council about a code of conduct which adapts with the times that you're in. And then post that thing so you can see it from outer space. So back to my conversation about the homeless. And in our time together, I want you to think about how valuable this process of doing this thing as a task force, how you can get the people on the screen that you see together to come forward in a meeting at your library to say, what do we, and the pronoun is we, do about the mentally ill, the homeless, the drug addicted that come into our facilities. The issue I see in the library when this process is used is that A, we do it, but B, we don't do it strongly enough. One is we have one meeting only where these stakeholders come together and go, this is terrific, thanks for the information, this is really valuable, I really appreciate the contacts, and we've talked about this, and then we never get together to speak about it again. This should be a once a month meeting, once a quarter at a minimum, that goes on and on for a long span of time, and that each person in this room has responsibility and accountability for supporting what you're trying to do to keep the library safe. Because when homeless people overrun your facility and you feel swamped by this issue, these are the experts, the stakeholders that you need to bring in to have this conversation. The last one, of the faith-based and grant-funded groups, I get a lot of good use out of these folks. St. Vincent de Paul, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Charities, Salvation Army, these folks really work with this high-risk population, and they have a lot of information about what to do, how to get these folks help, lockers, showers, where to store their belongings, helping with jobs and treatment and things like this. So everybody on the screen, I think, is useful to help combat the issues that you're facing with that most high-risk population, homeless, mentally ill, substance abusers. The cops, of which I came from, in my perfect world, would come through your facility on an irregular basis, different times a day, or not for a couple days, but then again twice in one day. Call the watch commander for your city PD or your sheriff's department and say, who is the beat deputy or the beat officer that has my area of responsibility, and get that person into your facility and meet them and say hello. Get their cell phone number, ask them to come by on a regular basis. Tell them they can come in and this is what all cops want, a clean restroom. They can come in and use the staff bathroom. Every cop on the planet wants a safe place to go to the bathroom. I know this from experience. And talk to the cops about problematic people, situations, issues, kids, teenagers, gang members, drug sales, whatever it is that you have a concern about, and show them some security incident reports so they can get some information and come in and do their job. The cops have a model, ATM, we can see up at the top there. Ask, tell, make. They ask people to leave, they tell people to leave, they make people leave. We don't have such a model, but they do. And develop code words that help get the PD or the sheriff en route for dealing with difficult people. Don't say, one more word out of you, pal, and I'm going to call the cops. Have a code word that employees know, Mr. Blue, Mr. Green, Dr. Black, Mr. Brown, whatever it is, whatever uniform color they wear, have them go to a safe place and call 911. So this is the model I use all the time in training to help people deal with folks that are just not good rule followers. Introduce, explain, and ask. Hi, sir, I'm Steve from the library. I came over because I noticed that your son is riding on our cart like it's a skateboard. I know you know we have a policy about that, but could I ask you to ask him not to do that? Thanks very much. Introduce, explain, and ask is not a confrontational model like the police model. It is a model that we try to use to get people to comply, and it may take, and here's the key, more than one time for you saying this. You may need to do the explain and ask part 2 or 3 times before they get it. And if they don't get it, then you have another colleague or even a supervisor come over and say the exact same thing and see if they have better connection, better alignment, better rapport with this person to see if they'll comply. And if that doesn't work, then you make a decision as to whether or not what this person is doing is illegal behavior and ask them to leave. If not, then you can call the PD or the sheriff and have them escort this person out. But that's a bold step. Typically, introduce, explain, and ask works. Once we get through the venting part, once people have told their story, they're more likely to hear what you have to say. And again, it's not a confrontational model. I'm sure you know we have a policy about this, or I'm guessing that you already know that our insurance company wouldn't like it if your son fell and hurt himself, so that's why we're asking you to do this. Sometimes a supervisor comes over and says the exact same thing you just said word for word, and the person complies. If that works, then that's great too. So typically what I see here in angry or challenging patrons is they want to vent. And I'm big on venting and validation, validating their concerns, using the best alignment that you have with them, aligning based on race or age or gender or previous contact. Every time I dealt with this person, they seem to be angry at me, but they like you, you take it. And vice versa, I'll take care of it. Space and distance, keeping people at arm's length, using proxemic barriers that we talked about, like desks and countertops and things like that, changing the ratios of confrontation, bringing over a coworker or bosses, setting boundaries. Sir, if you yell at me, I can't help you. Sir, if you say those things, you curse at me, I got to step away. I can't help you. I have to go help somebody else. Code words we talked about. And then the validation part, saying things to people that are empathic, like, I see you, I understand. You could be right. I'm sorry that happened. Maybe taking notes is a way to demonstrate empathy as a validation part as well. As we see in George Thompson's book, Verbal Judo, people want to be heard. They want to be valued, listened to, understood. And when we can do that, it really helps lower the emotional temperature. Kids, we talked about, separate the groups, separate the kids and talk to the one kid that seems to be the one that maybe the other ones may listen to. You can't do that if you want to stay here is a great phrase. How do we align with them? How are we sensitive to the fact that they're embarrassed sometimes when they get called out by an adult? How do we consider the fact that peer pressure sometimes drives their behavior? Are we firm, fair, and consistent? Are we enforcing consequences on a regular basis? Are we being patient with them? And are what they doing, is it hurting the business or not? I don't always see that. I don't always agree that sometimes, older patients will come in and complain about the noise level with kids. And sometimes I just feel like saying, well, you know what? Kids are kids, and they're not ruining the library. They're just having fun. And sometimes you got to be, kind of that devil's advocate for those people that don't seem to like kids very much. But those of you that work with this population, I hope you agree with my perspective on this. Inappropriate sexual boundaries with people is a big concern for me. Stalking behaviors, physical sexual contact that people make with patrons, that is illegal behavior. It's also a sign of escalation. It oftentimes leads to things that grow in intensity. Somebody starts off exposing themselves in a public place, and then they move to crimes like sexual assault or rape. I'm always concerned that when people escalate their behavior, we call the cops when it has to do with a sexual nature like this, because typically what you're seeing in these things are crimes. Sexual battery, sexual exposure, sexual contact like that is a crime. Pedophiles go to the library because of kids and access to pornography. This is not the guy that snatches the kid off the street in a van, and it's always a van, isn't it, ladies? It's the guy who grooms this child, who spends a lot of time with this kid, playing Game Boy games or giving him McDonald's or something like that until this kid trusts this adult and then leaves with this person. If you feel like that's happening and you've seen this grooming behavior, call the police. The cops talk to these guys, and the first thing they ask is, have you ever been arrested? And the second thing they ask is, are you a sex offender on the registration list? And if they're not, they're out of compliance, they get arrested for a felony. Domestic violence involving patrons and staff. Again, I see crossovers sometimes from home to work involving employees. I'm a big believer in employee assistance program, or EAP referrals. Find out if you have an employee assistance program in your city or your county. Library supervisors can make great referrals to EAP. HR can be involved as well. We can move the employee to a new facility, put them in the back office, get them in contact with domestic violence advocacy groups. Staff members sometimes may have good rapport with domestic violence victims and may be able to give them, quietly and safely some information about domestic violence advocacy when we see these people come into our facilities. We talk about the homeless, again, getting people to the table that bring their various expertise about how to deal with this group, space and distance when dealing with them, using space and distance and not trying to talk them out of their mental illness or they're out of their substance abuse issues, but being able to ask them to leave and set boundaries in their behavior. This is typically how we're going to address the homeless population, and in partnership with our stakeholders that we talked about before. Again, mentally ill people are typically not dangerous to you. They're more dangerous to themselves. But in the third bullet point there, you see something called the three-type criteria. The three-type criteria is danger to self, danger to others, or gravely disabled. If you see a population of the mentally ill person that is a danger to himself or herself, like depressed or suicidal, danger to other people, aggressive or violent or homicidal, or gravely disabled, meaning they can't care for themselves, we got to call the police. The cops come and they take them to a mental health facility or a hospital for an evaluation. And consider restraining orders for a very problematic homeless, mentally ill, drug-using population. It sets boundaries. It's easy to get one if the person's been threatening or violent. It's easy to get one if we can point to a collection of behaviors over a span of time. That's why security incident reports are so valuable. Gang members, I'm not talking about kids that wear their pants low or sag their pants or wear their hats sideways. I'm talking about gangsters, guys that have been in prison as recently as this morning. They are hypersensitive to being slighted, especially in front of their girl or in front of their crew. So if you embarrass these guys, it's on. That could turn to violence, shootings, all kinds of fun stuff like that. So I'm careful with this population. I'm not afraid of anybody. I don't want you to be afraid. But be careful around this population because they're hypersensitive to being slighted. So be careful in how you have conversations with them. Get some help from the police. They have gang suppression officers. They have juvenile officers. They have people that have expertise in these areas. Substance abusers. It's illegal to be high on drugs and alcohol in public. If people can't control their goodies, call the cops, okay? We have opiate users, which are just totally, completely out of control in this country. Opiate users typically have something called pin dot pupils. They're on the nod, which means they're half asleep. They're almost into the throes of overdose. Be ready to call the paramedics if you see people that nod off or pass out on the floor for what we suspect is opiate use. Stimulant drug users, very cyclical or erratic in their behavior, blown out pupils, very agitated, hypersensitive to authority, and they don't dig the government or the cops or anything like that. They can be very problematic with their behavior. And then, of course, we have alcohol users who are also cyclical in their behavior. Ask people to leave for the day. Say, you can't come in here high on drugs. You can't come in here drunk. You got to go. Use space and distance, and if that doesn't work, we call the police. And think about how we need sometimes to call paramedics, too. Internet misusers. Is it time wasting? Is it pornography? Is it hurting the business? Are people complaining? Then how do we enforce our policy about how people use or misuse our internet on a firm, consistent, fair basis? I like filters. I like time limits. I like separating devices that put, panels between the two computers. I like that type of stuff. And sometimes we can use peer pressure to say, can you ask this? I've asked this person to get off the machine and they won't. But from the idea of sometimes careful peer pressure that we're going to get some compliance when someone says, hey, I got to do my job resume. Can you get off the machine so I can have it? Sometimes these patrons will comply. Be careful with that, though. That also leads to fistfights. So the last one is really people that just hurt our business. They leave kids. They steal from us. They don't listen to our policies. They're highly entitled. Again, we let the entitled vent. We enforce our codes of conduct. We are firm, fair, and consistent. We call the cops for theft and shoplift. We confront people who are trying to steal our stuff. We confront parents about not leaving their kids. And we call the cops if we believe this child is being abused or abandoned. Lastly, elderly, disabled, non-English speakers. Again, patience. The Platinum Rule says treat people the way they want to be treated. The Golden Rule says treat people the way you want to be treated. I disagree. I think the Platinum Rule is what we need to follow. Treat people the way they want to be treated. So you have a Spanish speaker and you don't speak Spanish, find them a translator. Don't say, I'm going to keep yelling at this person in English until they get it. And the last one, coworkers with issues, EAP. Big fan of Employee Assistance Program, counseling, been myself. If you've been and you feel comfortable talking to people as a referral, it's useful. We can't make them go, but it is very valuable for all the personal and professional stressors that people face on and off the job. Let's talk about workplace violence as we wrap up. The most common workplace violence perpetrator is type 1. 50% of workplace violence is robbery. What we're talking about in our discussion here today is category 2. 25% of the people are typically people we provide services to. Category 3 is 20%, former or current employees. And category 4, domestic violence, is 5%. And I think category 4 is underreported, and the statistics are probably much higher. But for our purposes, category 1, crooks, pretty rare that people are doing robberies in the library. Nobody in prison says, I'm going to the library to steal, to rob the circulation desk. It's mostly street crimes and liquor stores and things like that. So our focus today, in your part, the 25% is type 2. How many of these, I say in training, would you need to see before you'd be concerned enough to call the police? And the answer is 1. These are casing behaviors. These are bad people getting ready to do bad things. They may have a perfectly reasonable context, but probably not. If we're going to do something bad to a facility like a library, these are some things that people may do to harm the people coming in and out, or to hurt the facility, or to cause disruption there. If you see these things, you don't have to confront these folks. Just be a professional witness, a good information provider like you already are to the police or the sheriff. These are casing behaviors. Now, they may make perfect sense in context, but usually not. As we wrap up, let's talk about Run, Hide, Fight. I'm a big fan of the video Run, Hide, Fight. It was done about 3 years ago. It's on YouTube. It is done by the Department of Homeland Security and the City of Houston, Texas. It says 3 things for the rare possibility of an active shooter or armed attacker with a gun or a knife. Get out of the building. Take as many patrons and employees as you can. Hideout, barricade inside the building, break room, restroom, conference room, supervisor's office, training room, place we store the mops. And the last one, fight back. These aren't Navy SEALs gone rogue. These are just dipsticks with guns that live in their parents' basement. And we can stop these people. I'm a power lifter and a martial artist. 3 women could hold me down if they jumped on top of me. 2 guys could do it for sure. So the fighting back part, I think, is just as important as the run hide. We put these in order. Get out first, hide out second, fight back third. Show the video at staff meetings. Show the video age appropriate to your kids, say 12, 13, 14 and above. Talk about what you do at church or a restaurant or a movie theater or out in public at the mall, because this concept works as well. Cover, as you see on the slide there, stops bullets. Concealment hides you. You want cover. Brick walls, steel doors. Concealment hides you. Curtains, glass. Okay, concealment is not what we want. We want cover. And then in my perfect world, we do a 15-minute drill every year on run, hide, fight. Run out of the building or hide out of the building, hide out inside the building, and that's all you need to demonstrate. You don't have to do the fighting back part. So take a look at the video. It's 6 minutes long. If you want to skip the first minute and a half, it shows the guy with a shotgun shooting people. You can do that. It's not bloody, but some people don't like it. I'm cool with that. But show the video as a staff meeting. Get everybody on board with this concept. It is the national protocol in this country for the rare possibility of an active shooter. So we'll wrap up. A couple things to remind you about: space and distance, keeping people at arm's length, using proxemic barriers like desks and counters and shelves. Okay. Also, physical movement. Sir, step over here with me. Sir, can we talk over here? And the assertive whisper. I'm going to drop my voice and my tone. If this person's yelling, I'm going to model what I want. I'm not going to match them scream for scream. And I'm going to stop saying calm down. On the phone, again, neutral, friendly, and polite. Be careful of condescension. They hear you sighing over the phone. They can hear a condescending phrase. They can see you looking at your watch over the phone. So be careful. Under promise, over perform. I'll have that for you tomorrow. Get it for them today. And then set boundaries. If they curse, give them one warning and then hang up. And then document that conversation so that people know that there are consequences for their language and that they can't say or do whatever they want just because I pay your salary. So look at these phrases that don't work. You need to calm down. That's not our policy. I can't help you. I'm going on my break. Stop saying those things. Let's talk about what does work, especially calm down. These come from George Thompson's book, Verbal Judo. You wouldn't understand. It's none of your business why we do that. What do you want me to do about it? I'm not going to ask you again or tell you again or explain it again, and then we do. Why can't you be reasonable is probably one of the most hurtful things you can say to somebody who's angry, because it suggests to them that you don't think they're reasonable. Now, that may be true, but again, we have to use good acting skills, good professional customer service skills. Let's focus on what phrases do work. I see, I understand, you could be right. I'm sorry that happened. I'm not trying to make you mad. Tell me more. Let me get my supervisor for you. Our insurance won't let you do that. And my favorite one, you can't do that if you want to stay here. So there's Thompson's book. There's his most famous acronym, active listening. That's the listening part. Empathy is the E. I can see you're upset. Tell me more. Asking questions. Get more information. Paraphrasing suggests to them that you were heard and they heard you and that there's some better rapport there. And also seek solutions that are good for them. Solve their problem their way. The platinum rule. What is their need here, not my need? What do they need to be satisfied, not necessarily my need? So I encourage you to take a look at that book, Verbal Judo. It's a classic. Got some medical and first aid issues here as we wrap up. I want everybody and their brother to be trained in CPR. I'd like everybody in my perfect world to be trained in AED. If you only train a couple people in AED, then we have some issues that that person's not there. Don't assume people have called 911 for medical or first aid issues. Make sure that someone actually has done it. Fires, update your evacuation procedures. Make sure that you follow the rules of the fire marshal that they want in terms of the protection for your building. Make sure the smoke alarms and the fire system and the sprinklers and that work, and test that stuff on a regular basis. Earthquakes, not an issue other places besides California, but make sure we have a drill. Make sure we evacuate successfully and safely if it ever happens where there's significant damage to the building. Chemicals, gas leaks. Again, this may be an accidental thing that the cleaning people mix 2 chemicals together. It could be a broken pipe. Again, follow your evacuation procedures. Tornadoes, weather, hurricane, things like that. Make sure that you have a protocol in place if your facility needs to be used to shelter people or to evacuate, and then follow the updates that you get from your emergency operations team for your city or your county. Besides flooding and plumbing issues, either broken pipes or just bad pipes or things, the other thing I see that doesn't have anything to do with security, but it's an irritant, is bed bugs. So that's always a concern. So I'm always thinking maybe the floods in the facility will wash out the bed bugs. We can't pick the people that come into our facilities, but we can enforce our code of conduct. We want every employee to feel that they're in charge of safety and security. We want good acting skills, good high-risk customer service skills. Look at George Thompson's book. Use role plays in your staff meetings to create scenarios that are common for the situations that you face. Homeless people, sleepers, internet issues, and things like that. So the staff feels like they are empowered about what to do and not just have to guess every time. What's the impact on the business? What is this person doing that hurts the business of our library? That's my rationale as to when we get involved. Update your code of conduct, post it physically so people see it. We want staff to be firm, fair, consistent, and assertive, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, not just once in a while. Look at patrons that you deal with, not from a perspective of them being difficult, but what is the challenge that they face for your organization? And go back to your highest risk group, which is usually typically homeless, mentally ill, and substance abusers, and partner, meet with task force created by the social service agencies, law enforcement agencies, and private sector agencies that can help with this population. So, common solutions, security incident reports. I like verbal restraining orders or verbal kick-out orders or verbal stay-away orders. Dave, you're out for the week. You can't come back here. Mr. So-and-so, you can't come back for 5 days. I see that work for some reason. I don't know why, but it does. Try a lighter touch, a little bit of humor. It's not just, you can't eat that sandwich in here, but boy, I wish I could join you. That roast beef looks delicious, but you can't eat in the library. You can always get tougher, but sometimes it's easier just to have a little lighter touch. And the last one, have courage. There's my contact information. I'm happy to hear from you on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht or by email. Happy to hear your questions there. And I'm not sure how much time we have, just a touch perhaps. If you have some questions or concerns, I'm keen to know what it can be. If not, I'm happy to hear from you by email. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Steve, that was terrific. I am going to break my rule and allow a couple questions if people have them. Go a little bit over. I hope Brian doesn't mind. Anybody have any questions for Steve? I had a little doubt you're going to be able to fit it all in, Steve. You had a lot of slides, but you did it.
Stepped on the gas pedal at the end there.
I have a couple questions for you, Steve. What do you suggest that library staff do about packages or unaccompanied parcels or unknown objects if they find them in the library?
I think you make a small scene and you say it at a louder tone. Does anybody belong to this box, or whose backpack is this? I think you make a scene. I think you got to get people on notice about their stuff. And if you can't get anybody's ownership of it, I don't think it's bombs. That seems unlikely to me. It's mostly people just leave junk or forget. But I think you make a scene and you try to get people to own up to their stuff. And if not, I think you take it over to a safe place and take a look and see what's inside. And if there are problematic things inside there, needles or stolen property, call the cops.
Question here, what about situations where an adult male takes a young female child into the men's restroom?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think you ask a question. You say, sir, are you a relative? Or if you'd like, I'm a female staff member. I can take your daughter or niece or whatever into the restroom if that would be better for you, and just try to save face with them. The question is it somebody doing something inappropriate or illegal, or is it just some guy that doesn't want to let his daughter go into the restroom by himself? I think you have to kind of figure that out carefully without embarrassing that person.
My daddy always used to take me to the movies, lunch in the movies at Christmas, and I can't tell you how many waitresses I got to know by having them take me into the restroom.
That with my daughter, same thing. I said, teenage girls are, can you make sure my kid's okay in the restroom? They would do it all the time.
Sure, yeah. And then, can you provide an example of how to tactfully address the issue of excessive body odor?
That's a hard one. I mean, it may be an employee. I've had that conversation, but with homeless people, typically, or mentally ill people, you say, I'm not here to embarrass you, but you got to come back cleaner with cleaner clothes. You got to come back without body odor because it hurts our business. And I think you default onto the business impact hurts our business kind of theme.
Do you have any suggestions for dealing with, I don't want to say gangs, but groups of kids that come into the library after school and are just having a good time, but are disturbing others?
I think you try to talk to one of them, not the whole group, and see, pick the one that seems to be the most reasonable. Pull that kid aside and go, "You can't do that if you want to stay here. Or, you guys got to quiet down. Could you go back and tell your friends?" Because if you try to have a conversation with the whole group, they just come after you.
Right, right. There's a library here in town that's right across the street from the high school, and they have issues all the time just because of location. They're just right there.
What I would do for that one is I would meet with the principal and say, "Can we, principal and library folks, can we come up with a plan? Like, here's a copy of our code of conduct. Can I give this to you to give to all the kids to take home, or something like that? Especially the junior higher elementary school level, where there's some work that's done between the principal and the library folks to come up with a plan."
Oh, that's an excellent suggestion. Absolutely fantastic suggestion. I keep asking questions. Are there any other questions out there from anybody else? I think we've hit it, Steve. Excellent
Thanks for
work.
the help and support, everybody, and thanks for your help.
Great work. Great work, Steve. Thanks very much.